Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin discusses President Trump's tax reform plan at the G7 summit. Take a listen.
I think, as I've also talked about before, on the business side, there are many reports that as much as 70% of the tax burden that companies pay are passed on to workers. So we are very focused on creating a middle-income tax cut to grow the economy and to make our business efficient and competitive.
Tony Sayegh joins us now, U.S. Treasury Public Affairs Assistant Secretary. Tony, thanks for joining us.
Good to see you, Charles.
Yeah, some of this stuff seemed like low-hanging fruit during the campaign and upon the inauguration, and everyone was excited. You know, infrastructure, low-hanging fruit, tax reform, low-hanging fruit. What's been the trouble? What's the problem with getting these things through?
Well, we actually are very confident that we can get tax reform done and get it done this year. Speaker Ryan just yesterday suggested the same thing. We obviously don't want to put any specific time frame other than getting it done in 2017 because there's tremendous consensus. This is one of the things that I think requires a lot more reporting than has been done. The House, the Senate, the administration work together collaboratively on what's going to ultimately be part of the tax reform legislation. It's pro-growth. It focuses on a middle-income tax cut. It simplifies the tax code, something I think every American could certainly agree on. And it makes businesses competitive again so we can start having smaller businesses create more American jobs.
One of the terms that we hear the last couple of weeks in GOP circles, particularly when the House is trying to get through the health care bill, is don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Is the administration letting the grandiose be the enemy of the good as well? In other words, the idea that this has got to be the biggest tax reform package ever. Is that hampering perhaps the idea that you can go about this like Ronald Reagan did and get parts of it done, but get it done ultimately?
Well, we have great consensus on a lot of things, Charles, and we do believe the big can get done because it's needed by the economy. We've had very little sustained economic growth since the financial crisis. That's bad news for everybody. Bad news for workers, bad news for companies, bad news for the government. Revenue gets a big hit when the economy is not growing. It doesn't allow us to deal with longer-term issues, frankly, when we don't have a growing economy. So that's why we're focused on it. You just showed the clip from the G7. The world is counting on the United States to have a sustained growing economy. Economic growth was a big part of the conversation of the G7. Leaders like Finance Minister in Germany, Schäuble, have indicated America needs to take that leadership role on these economic issues, and we're only going to get there if we begin to enact a lot of these domestic policies on regulatory relief, on tax reform, on infrastructure and other things to really generate and stimulate sustained economic growth beyond what we've been seeing for the last 8 years.
So the consensus is there. It's just how to get there, and I know the negotiation process has begun. What is it too early to say what may not happen that we thought would happen? In other words, there's a lot of talk now about maybe upper income tax levels staying relatively high or some deductions maybe being eliminated. In other words, there's a certain economic threshold where people may not get the tax benefits that they were hoping for coming into this.
Well, it's a good point, and let me reemphasize. The idea on the individual side is a significant middle-income tax cut.
That's the focus.
That is the focus. Obviously, when it comes to the code itself, the two exemptions, the deductions that we have taken off the table are charitable and home mortgage interest. Those are shared by a large number of Americans. Of course, there's going to be a process back and forth by which everything is discussed, and we'll see what ends up happening.